thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to reconvene our County Commission meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. It is 1:30. We have a motion to accept proofs of publication.
So moved.
Second.
It's a motion by Commissioner Zembauer, second by Commissioner Herr. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Before we start our proceedings this afternoon, we have one quasi-judicial item on our agenda and one legislative item on the agenda. I'm going to go ahead and read our rules for public hearings. We don't have very many folks here from the audience, from the community, but there were some forms out in the lobby if anyone was interested in submitting a yellow form to speak or a green form to have your comments submitted for the record. You can go get those now. So this afternoon, our staff is going to present each item for consideration with a staff recommendation, and the board will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff when presentations have finished. At that point, the applicant will have an opportunity to make a presentation, and the board will have a chance to ask questions once the presenter has finished. Members of the public who are interested in speaking, either for or against the project or issue, fill out the yellow form located in the lobby indicating the item number that you wish to speak about, whether you support or oppose the item, and provide the form to our county staff sitting at the desk up front. Members of the public will only be allowed to give comment once per item. If you would like to have your comments submitted for the record, that's the purpose of the green form. Please fill it out and also provide that to county staff here at the front table, and they'll make sure and pass that down the dais for each one of us to read. Speakers should state for their name and address clearly for the record, and whether you are for or against the item, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak unless you are the official spokesperson for an HOA or a legally organized group, and then you'll be given 6 minutes. If a board member has questions regarding the speaker's comments, an opportunity will be given once the speaker's time has expired. In accordance with the operating policies and procedures of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners, Section 2.175, Public Participation Before the Board, speakers shall limit their comments to the subject being considered by the board. All comments shall avoid personal attacks, abusive language, and redundancy. Disrespectful, rude, irrelevant, or slanderous remarks or disruptive behavior may subject the individual to removal from the board chambers, and the chairman may curtail repetitious comments. The clerk's office is required to retain any documents, photographs, or drawings that are presented to the Board of County Commissioners, so if you show it to us, be prepared to leave it with the clerk as a part of the official record. Once all speakers are heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal if necessary. We'll then close the public hearing and put the matter in the hands of the commission. Following a motion and a second, there will be board discussion and a vote will be taken, and commissioners who do not cast an objecting vote will be considered to have voted in support of the item. For our quasi-judicial item this afternoon, we want to remind everyone that while the board welcomes comments from all persons with an interest in this proceeding, Florida law requires that the board's decision in a quasi-judicial action be supported by competent substantial evidence presented to the board during the hearing of the application. Competent substantial evidence is evidence such that a reasonable mind would accept as adequate to support a conclusion. There must be a factual basis in the record to support opinion testimony from both expert and non-expert witnesses. Persons presenting testimony may rely on factual information that they present, that is presented by a county staff member, that the applicant presents, or on factual information included in the county staff report to support their testimony. All persons who present written materials to the board for consideration must ensure that an additional copy is provided to the clerk for inclusion in the board's record of proceedings and official minutes. Has any commissioner received any oral or written communication regarding the quasi-judicial items? If so, please disclose the substance of the communication and identify the person making the communication. Commissioner Zembauer?
I have. It's all been submitted electronically through the clerk's office.
Great. Commissioner Herr?
I have in the form of phone calls with Mr. George Salary, and it has been submitted through the clerk's office.
Okay. Any others?
I have, and I have submitted it electronically.
Okay.
We
And
submitted it from the last meeting, but since then to now, we have not.
right. I also had ex parte from the last item, but not up till now. Before we address item 35, we're actually going to address item 36 because staff is requesting a continuance as we were notified about this morning. So, Mr. Gray, do you want to address that for
Sure.
us?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, so item number 36, staff is recommending a continuance till October the 24th. We're still doing a few briefings, and that will give us enough time to finish those briefings and then bring that back to the board. And I just finished a discussion with Ms. Hammack. That's not going to, we're not missing any deadlines if we have it on the 24th, correct? So the 24th works for us.
And just, the 24th is the drop-dead date. It cannot be pushed past the 24th, is that correct?
I'll have Ms. Hammack address this.
I think we need to,
Yeah,
because it is pretty important.
yeah.
Yes. For the record, Rebecca Hammack, Development Services Director. So as you're aware, we're also processing the year-based amendments, but along with the Land Development Code updates, we have concurrent comprehensive plan amendments. So if we delay the LDC amendments that have the concurrent comprehensive plan amendments, it's going to create discrepancies with the year-based amendments. So we really need to bring this forward prior to the year-based amendments coming before you for transmittal.
Okay. So any questions, any concerns, any clarifications, we need to get those from you and cleared up before the 24th so that we're ready to address this on that agenda. Is that what I'm
Yes,
hearing from
please.
you?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Commissioners, do we want to have a motion to move?
Move to a
this item?
date certain of October 24th, 2023.
Sorry, second.
Motion by Commissioner Zembauer, seconded by Commissioner Herr. Discussion, Commissioner Delary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I had a bunch of questions. I'd like to, since we can't talk to each other outside of this meeting, I'd like to actually show you what my questions are. I can do that, correct?
Yes, you can provide it to each of the other commissioners as long as
Today.
they don't respond. Yeah.
And so I'm just going to hand it out to you all as well with staff. I was going through it this weekend, and these are the questions that I came up with, and I'm planning on meeting with staff as soon as possible to make sure that these and additional questions will be addressed. I just want to make sure that everyone sees what,
That's great. Thank you.
that's your two, that way.
Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yep. Commissioner Zembauer?
I would just ask staff, I know this has been a very laborious task that has been drudging along for quite some time. I think it would be helpful, and I talked to some of the stakeholders, if we could get possibly a roadmap and tying the LDC comp plan and the air amendments together, so we all know where those moving pieces are going from one document to the other and back and forth. Is that a possibility?
If faces could tell a
I know.
story.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yes, and actually, I had provided a graphic at the last work session for the year-based amendments that showed that entire process flow.
Right.
So we can certainly share that with the stakeholders as well.
Yeah, but maybe what I may be more specific, and I appreciate that answer. I'm talking about the specific line items that we are contemplating changing, the provisions we're changing, and exactly where they flow in and out of the EAR as well as any of the elements of the comp plan.
So with the year-based amendment, so the land development code updates, that's what this is the first, this was supposed to be the first reading of the ordinance to amend the land development code.
Right.
There are concurrent comprehensive plan amendments that specifically relate to those land development code changes related to like missing middle specifically
Right.
as an example. And so where we had to change the comprehensive plan to match the land development code changes. So the year-based amendments, which we have scheduled a third work session on October 10th. So when we go forward with the year-based amendments, they will incorporate the changes that are being proposed with the LDC.
Understood. You know, I follow all that. I'm just asking, do you have a blueprint of where that's flowing in and out?
Yeah, we can.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. We provided copies of the land development code changes and the
Understood.
comprehensive plan changes to all the stakeholders numerous times. So
Okay.
I guess my question is, can you define the blueprint?
But how about,
I'll handle it. I'll just,
Okay.
it's easier followed coming from you all, the same method to everyone, so we don't all get off in the weeds and our stakeholders get off in the weeds. But I'll build my own. It's not a problem.
no.
I think Commissioner Zembauer, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Gray has been trying
Yes.
to get a word in, and so.
So I think you all are saying actually the same
Same.
thing, Commissioner Zimbar. I believe we definitely have that. So let us go over that with you, so make sure we're on the same page with what you're talking about. And then from there, yes, we can actually give that out to the stakeholders and you all or anyone else that you all want us to distribute that to. So we're all working off the same sheet of music.
Right, because the problem has been is we've been piecemealed over a couple of years.
Yes.
With this is a red line of this section, this is a red line of that section. At no time do we have one whole document.
Correct.
Although it's in the ordinance, I got that, but then you can't go from the ordinance back to the original code, to what the provisions are, where it goes into the year. And maybe it's me, maybe I can't follow that, but
We'll go over it with you.
Yes, we have, so in the past work sessions, we've provided, we were calling it a friendly draft of the Land Development Code, and that did a strike-through underline version. So we have provided that to the board previously. And we had indicated at the previous work sessions that when it did come before you for final adoption, Chapter 30 is an entire repeal and replace, so you would only see the clean version, actually Chapter 2 and Chapter 30. Chapter 2 is the definitions. So, but we have provided a strike-through underline of all of the changes previously. But we can go through that again.
Yes, we will.
Thank you so much. Any other questions before we take up? Yep, Commissioner Herr?
Just a comment that I think there's been, 16 briefings on this topic, some of
Yes.
which came before me, but I've only had 13 seconds while you were talking to look at the document that was handed to me. I would ask that the answers get added to this document so that it's not just the telephone game of briefings down the hallway, that we actually take these one by one so that we can move forward in time, and we're all on the same page at that point.
And that was the reason for me to
Very good
present it to you, because
suggestion.
that's what I'm trying to do.
Yep.
And I'll give that to staff digitally, not hard copy.
Sure, we have it. Thank you.
And then, Chairman, can I make one more
Yes.
request, if possible? Commissioner Zembauer and I also spoke about some possible changes. Could we include those or distribute those as well to the other board members? Because I do think some of those are policy-related questions that we need consensus from the board on.
I've got no problem putting my list and sharing my list with my fellow commissioners. I mean, in my opinion, it's all policy
Yes.
decision-making on this issue.
Right.
So I got no problem with that at all.
Okay.
That would be helpful. That way we can all come to the conversation with the same information. I think that would be
Okay,
very
sounds
great.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, item number 35. Mr. Robinson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Doug Robinson with Planning and Development. I'm here to present the Allure on the Parkway. This item was continued from the August 22nd Board of County Commissioners meeting. The applicant is requesting a small-scale future land use map amendment from plan development to plan development and a rezone from PD plan development to PD plan development in order to increase the number of multifamily residential units from 300 to 680 in the PD. So in September of 2016, the PD was approved for 300 multifamily units, 40,000 square feet of retail, 15,000 square feet of restaurant, 80,000 square feet of Class A office space, and a 200-key room hotel. The applicant is now proposing to add 380 multifamily units in place of the 200-room hotel and the 80,000 square feet of office space. The current PD entitles 40,000 square feet of retail and 15,000 square feet of restaurant space to remain in the PD. The draft development order still allows the applicant the ability to have the hotel and office uses up to the previously approved maximums through an equivalent reduction of another proposed use. The equivalent reduction is determined by using a traffic conversion matrix, which is included in the development order. Since the August 22nd board meeting, the following changes were made to the development order. Workforce housing is no longer being proposed. The applicant has committed to 5,000 square feet of retail space. Permitted uses now exclude drive-through restaurants. And the new condition was added to explore providing parking for the Seminole-Wekiva Trail during final development plan. I'm abbreviating this a little bit because we have went over this a few times, but I'm happy to answer any questions if I don't cover something. So regarding the future land use designation, it's currently zoned plan development, as I stated earlier. That allows a maximum intensity of non-residential floor area of up to, floor area ratio of up to 1.0. The proposed future land use map amendment would maintain that maximum intensity of 1.0 floor area ratio. The overall multifamily residential density would change. If you include the existing multifamily units, the 300 plus the additional 380 over the entire planned development area of 12.2 acres, the overall density would be 55.7 dwelling units per acre. And I'm happy to explain that later and talk about that if that would help. As far as right-of-way dedication, the applicant proposes a right-of-way dedication with shared access along the northern property boundary in order to serve the new fire station on First Street. And then the specific area will be determined at the time of the final development plan. Regarding school capacity, the additional students generated by the proposed project can be accommodated without exceeding adopted levels of service standards for each school type. So as I mentioned, I'm going to kind of go briefly, get right to it. The consistency with the land development code and the comprehensive plan, we find that the proposed plan development, future land use designation, and plan development zoning classification to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development code. Staff recommends that the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a small-scale future land use map amendment from plan development to plan development, and adopt the ordinance enacting a rezone from PD plan development to PD plan development, and approve the associated development order and master development plan for approximately 12.2 acres located on the west side of International Parkway, approximately a half-mile north of County Road 406A. That concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions for Mr. Robinson? We reserve the right to call you back up. How's that?
Yes, thank you. And the applicant, I do see, is in the room as well.
Okay. All right. Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Good to see everybody.
Hello?
Matthew Weidman, I'm here with Max Gunter, my partner and longtime owner and participant in this land. We've been here a few times, and I look forward to covering what I think has collectively brought everybody's thoughts, concerns, and ultimately what we're going to go through with you, I think, is the highest and best use for what we look at as the anchor to the entryway into Lake Mary's International Parkway. So we'll go through the presentation. It'll be segmented into 2 site plans of what is allowable per the existing zoning, 2 site plans for the residential use that we're currently evaluating both executions. We'll share some ideas on where we could add additional parking for the trail, and followed by a touch on the office market, because we're asking for a change from the existing office entitlement to residential. So we want to touch on the dynamics of the existing office market within Lake Mary as they stand today. I've also brought Robbie McEwen, who's a top office leasing and sales broker within Central Florida. So when I get to that slide 2, I'll bring him up just to add a few perspectives from somebody that's in the market. And then the last piece, I'm going to share just 3 pictures, and we'll talk through 3 high-density kind of mixed-use projects that are within the southeast that have really become the highest and best use, and that is really the ultimate vision of what we see within our site, as well as the new density that's added to our site, supporting other uses, office, retail, of the surrounding and contiguous parcels. So with that, there we go.
That's yours.
All right. So this is what we're allowable per the existing PD, and really where we've identified the existing market demand. So as you can see, we have 3 outparcel restaurants and a limited service hotel. Given the strong demand from users with the new highway infrastructure package that's coming, drive-through as well as out-parcel restaurants, so these are two different configurations of site plan, we know we can meet the market today. Our view is that this site is really prime for, a 9-figure, high-quality, mixed-use residential retail project. So this is one of our site plans that would incorporate both the 4.5 acres and the 1.5 acres to the south as shared density. This can be anywhere from a 4-story to a 6-story product. We're again going through different exercises of costing and pricing to determine this site plan and what direction we ultimately take it. I'm going to share with you the second, but as you can see, it goes from around 250 to a little over 380 units. It's also important to point out on the highlighted parcel to the south, while we've committed to 5,000 square feet of minimum retail, in this site plan, which is a lower retail component, we have just under 12,000 square feet. So our hope is that today we can get the entitlements, and then we will be able to go make a market within the retail space, depending on what that demand is. Directly across Allure, you'll see the shaded area that we've identified as amenity space. That could also potentially be an anchor for additional retail if the market signals to us that there is additional retail density that wants to come to this site. So this is the other configuration where we actually densify all the residential to the north 4.5 acres, allowing us to preserve the 1.5 for other uses, primarily retail focused. Again, this is the costing analysis that we're going through to really evaluate what the best plan is for this project. This is just a rendering of the 7-story product. That was the slide just before this. This is the quality of project that we intend to bring to this site. This is the parking. So while it's not on this site, you can actually see in the corner, we actually have deeded parcel or a deed to that corner sliver, which we've explored as additional parking for the trail. Again, within the DO, we're asking for an opportunity to come sit back down with the county so that we can expand parking in either this location. This location to the south is actually owned by the county right now. So again, depending on what the county's desires are, we could add anywhere from 15 to 30 additional parking spaces in one or both of these sites. So I'm going to let Robbie come up and talk a little bit about the office market, but one of the things that we've, I think, all identified is that COVID has changed a lot of the in-office requirements between remote working and, coming from somebody that owns a lot of office, we've really been on the front lines of this, and Fortune 500s have really elected to take a lot of their workforce to remote. So the existing office vacancy within Lake Mary right now is around 19%. But when you add in the sublease space plus the dark space that is not being occupied, the existing office market vacancy today is just over 40%, which is why looking at our existing DO, the office is, in our opinion, not the right direction to go given the existing market. But I'll let Robbie touch a little bit more on our existing office.
Thank you, Matt. Madam Chairman, Board, appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to be fairly brief in going through this. I think Matt touched on this, but I'm head of investment sales for JLL. We're the second largest commercial real estate company in the world. We're seeing obviously some troubling trends in the office market. I don't think that's any secret to anyone in this room, but I'm in it day to day, so I see a lot of the things that are sort of, I guess, not seen in the public, not seen through the media. And because we have boots on the ground and we know the market very well, I think that 40% number is probably fairly surprising to some folks, because when you look at direct vacancy, you've got 19%, but underneath that, you've got a lot of sublease space on the market, which means that tenants don't intend to use that space, and typically when their lease expires, that means they're going to vacate. I think the other underlying stat that most people don't see is what we call dark space, which is existing lease space, or the tenants are just not in the building. So you drive by office buildings today, you don't see cars in the parking lot, lot, even though that building is on, still under lease and the owner still has a tenant technically in that building, they're not utilizing it and they're basically waiting for that lease expiration, and then they're obviously not going to be in that space. So underlying 40% is just a trend, unfortunately. I think obviously with COVID and work from home trends that we've seen in the market, it's basically created a downsizing of a number of companies to where even if they are still in the office, again, some groups and some companies completely have gone to a work from home model, but the groups that are in the office are typically on a hybrid schedule, so they're working anywhere between 2 and 4 days a week. So therefore, their occupancy or desired occupancy is in many cases 40 to 50% of what it used to be. And so as we've seen that downsizing, it's affected the market. Not all submarkets are created the same. Lake Mary is an institutional market. At one time, it was really our top institutional markets. And when I say institutional markets, there are basically 5 submarkets in Central Florida where institutions invest because they have the highest demand and the highest quality of office product. I think it's no secret Lake Mary has a lot of quality office product. Unfortunately, with those trends, the types of businesses that are in Lake Mary basically just were the type of businesses that went to those work from home trends and have been hit a little harder than a number of the other office submarkets. So we're seeing now some distressed assets come to the market. We're seeing some assets go to lenders. That's the trend now. So the bottom line here is that the lack of demand for office product. Again, there's a lot of quality office product, but there's not really much of a demand for that product right now. And in many instances, when we're valuing assets where there's dark space or a lot of vacancy, you're valuing the asset basically as what we'd call a covered land play. So it's really only worth the land underneath the building just because of the lack of demand. So because of the amount of space, we don't see that really changing anytime soon. I think certain submarkets are faring better than others because of the kind of underlying economics within those areas. So unfortunately, that's the trend, and unfortunately, Lake Mary has been hit fairly hard by that simply because you have sort of a lot of back office or insurance or tech companies that have gone to more of a work from home trend.
Thank you, Robbie. So the good news is that tenants are looking for higher density live, work, play that are contiguous to highways so that they can pull in a larger workforce. And they're really looking for product that has all these variety of uses that as they pull people back into the office, maybe it's somebody that's riding their bike across the street, it's somewhere where they can go get, a handful of different restaurant options within walking distance. So Interlock is a project in Atlanta. These are some of the highest office market rents. That's a fully occupied product. There's a residential component that's just on the other side of this site. You also have a retail component within this. The downtown Orlando Truist Tower, same dynamic. You have hotel, retail, and office. Those other uses are really what is supporting the office. Lastly, we have Camperdown in Greenville, South Carolina. So on this site, you have office, residential, and hotel. Same dynamic, fully leased office building, fully leased top-of-market multifamily projects, and some of the highest hotel RevPARs in all of South Carolina are at that project. So what we're proposing is to help support our neighbors in the contiguous office buildings and other retail by adding more residential, which is more people can support more restaurants and more office buildings. So happy to talk through any more of these in detail. But again, why we are asking for your support to allow us to change the office use to residential, and also in exchange dropping the drive-through, which I know the community and others have been against seeing more drive-through and limited service hotels. So with that, Max, I don't know if there's anything you want to add?
I'd like to thank all the commissioners and the staff members for supporting me over all these years, and I ask for your blessing. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Herr?
Take me back to the parking for the trail
Yes.
and walk me through the ownership of the property.
So, in the far right corner, there's just a sliver of that parking lot on the corner that is deeded to Max, and that site was always intended to be a memorial for Max Senior. And so when we were responding to comments about how do we expand parking, these are just options. We can also talk about expanding parking on our direct site by adding additional parking to support more uses, but our corner is owned by Mr. Max. The other parcel is actually a right-of-way that is owned by the county. So we would be open to participating, contributing our land while we honor Max Senior by creating a small memorial, and maybe this can turn into additional parking and maybe a playground or other shaded area to be a micro park for the community.
Okay.
Can you show us that on your site plan where that's located? Because I don't see it.
He's got a laser pointer there that,
do I?
I do.
Okay.
it's a dark shaded area?
Oh, I see the dark shade there, but I don't know where that is relating to your site plan.
I'll
Okay.
show you.
Yeah, there.
So, actually, the first area is right here,
Okay.
and then the second area is adjoining. Right now, the Allure has pedestrian connectivity out to the, Jonathan Martin with Kimley Horn Associates, civil engineer.
Now I know where it is.
So right now, there's pedestrian connections here, but we were thinking this is such a great opportunity to create parking here and/or a sort of parking in a pocket park for, kind of a little local park in the area as well. So those lands are available, and with the new road going through, that was kind of the thought that take advantage of the new fire access. We'd work with the fire department to decide where we'd put the gate, because I understand they don't want to be a free-flowing right-of-way to connect. So we would still have the fire department gate choicely put. We also talked about on-street parking here. If it's someday you decide to open that, you could come back and add some parallel spaces in here too, and add some additional parking for the trail. So, part of the commitment we made last time is that we were going to start investigating these ideas, and I think these two are winners.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Commissioners,
Yes, Mr. Chipak.
I would just like to point out that the space where the parking spaces are listed are outside the scope of this particular hearing. It's outside of the property that has been advertised for the rezoning today. So it's a discussion you're having with the developer about potential other parking, but it's not really germane to the rezoning today. I just wanted to point that out for the record.
I appreciate that. I asked that because the trail from parking to county-owned property and parking was concerning to me, so he's cleared that up, and I appreciate that's outside. The reason why it's not on the drawing is because it's outside of the scope of today's meeting. I do want to
Thank you.
understand better the 4-story to 6-story comment. Where do you think this will end up?
So our next step is, once we have approval to transition to residential, we move into CDs. And we intend to go through a full 6-story CD package. Once we have those CDs, now we are able to go back and exercise pricing. One of the dynamics of the existing market we're in is it's a little difficult to really pinpoint where cost is going to come in. The economic objective of ours is to add all 6 stories, all full density. Parallel to that, we are exploring FinFrock, which is a different type of construction system where we could include all of that density to the north 4.5 acres and then preserve that 1.5 acres to the south for another type of mixed use or additional retail density. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, but that actually is increased density on top of increased density in that plan. So, and quite honestly, I'm not 100% certain I understand what retail on 1.5 acres, and this might be myopic in my point of view, but I don't think you drive to a retail center that is on 1.5 acres as a destination. So it would have to be something that serves those apartments, dry cleaners, et cetera. Coffee shop. It's not really an additive to the rest of the community? Probably not going there.
So our original plan was to actually follow this process where all of the residential was included to the north. When we really started looking at costing exercises, we had to look at a different construction system, which is when we really started to say, okay, what if we spread some of that density to the south site? So what I can say is when we first started this project, what's interesting about this site is you actually have a very wide drive time to pull on consumers to the north. So we actually talked to 2 high-end restaurants about anchoring if that is a mixed-use solely retail project, it would have 2 higher-end restaurants that we were talking to about anchoring into that site. And then you fill in the balance with, the traditional users. It's coffee store, workout spot, dry cleaner, the other types of uses. But that quality of restaurateur really brings in a different type of user. But I'll say that it's kind of a coin flip right now where we go. The other project, the 4-story or 6-story project, where both residential units are spread across both, it would actually allow us to hit a lower market rental rate, which is part of our consideration in terms of what project we ultimately go. The other one is you're really reaching and stretching and pushing the top end of where market rents would be. The other 4-story or 6-story project would actually have a lower rent threshold for us to have economic viability.
Thank you. Can you tell us why you eliminated the workforce?
So in consideration of all of our evaluation, this is something we talked about with staff. What's interesting is our economics already maintain the whole project is within the workforce designation of the county at 140% of AMI. So as consideration to some of the concerns that we heard, we had stated, okay, let's add 10% of the unit to accommodate some of the requests that we were fielding. And when we brought those back to lenders, there's a limited pool of capital for workforce versus traditional market rate. And so inherently, we would actually be driving up the project cost by restricting the deed to workforce. In essence, we are already going to be achieving a sub 140% of AMI within our existing market rents of roughly $225 per square foot.
And what do you think the square footage of the units will be?
Roughly 900 feet on average.
Any other questions for Mr. Weidman?
No, thank you.
All right. We'll call you back up if we have any additional questions.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Are there any members of the public who have submitted forms wishing to speak?
No, ma'am.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak who neglected to fill out a form? See anyone? Seeing no members of the public who wish to speak, we'll close the public hearing. And Mr. Weidman, without anyone here to speak, there's nothing really to rebut, so I don't know if you need additional time to do that. Commissioners, you've heard a presentation from staff. You've heard the presentation from the applicant. You've heard questions from Commissioner Herr and answers. Are there any other questions or anything before Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you very much.
And then Commissioner Zembauer.
I'm going to try to, I don't want to belabor this, but this seems to be a shell game that, we're talking about 390 units on Lot 1, the addition of 15, as Commissioner Herr pointed out.
290. You said
390 units, did I say something wrong?
You said Lot 1.
Yeah, 390 units on Lot 1 or Lot 2,
290.
whichever one. I can't read that exactly. Maybe it's Lot 2.
Could we ask Mr. Weidman to give clarification?
It's Lot 2. No, that's Lot 1, yes, and that's
That has the 290.
that's the 290. The 390 is, and that is separate from yours. It's owned by somebody else. 390 on the northern lot. I guess that's Lot 2. But as Commissioner Herr pointed out, you're also looking at potentially 15,000 square foot restaurant, 40,000 square foot retail, having an opportunity for another 80,000 square feet in a 200-room hotel. guaranteeing 5,000 square feet of office space or commercial today. What we're getting for, or what the people, the taxpayers are getting for giving this additional density is potentially, but as our attorney pointed out, not necessarily parking for a trail, and a guarantee that we're not going to have drive-through restaurants, which probably in the market that wouldn't happen anyway. We asked on a 2-2 vote, which could have just ended there and could have said no, but we gave the developer the opportunity to come back and reevaluate this at a later date, for them to look at attainable housing, less density, a setback line, electric vehicles. We got the electric vehicles of 20% for parking. But the fact of the matter is that I don't understand what makes this project so special that in all essence, if you take out all of this and potentially you're down to like 4.5 or less, 4.47, which comes out to 85 units per acre on this property. Now, people will say, okay, I don't have a problem with density. Well, I do. Density creates, whether, traffic problems and congestions at certain time. It does create additional students in our classroom. It does diminish the quality of life in certain areas. But let's just go to unintended consequences. Unintended consequences are the Live Local Act. The Live Local Act, if I'm reading it correctly, and I've been told I am by lawyers, that whatever density we allow, the highest density in the county, affordable housing developers can come in and get that acreage density per acre. So what we're doing right now is the highest density in the county is 40 units per acre, which, by the way, is on the other lot right there. And at 85 units per acre, and let's just say, give them benefit of the doubt because they've merged the two, even though the one isn't owned by them, that it's 65 units per acre. Can you imagine the unintended consequences of developers coming in and saying, we can get 65 units per acre of affordable housing on XYZ lot based upon the Live Local Act? I don't want to be a downtown Orlando. And I don't, that to me is not anything that I'm excited about in that location. I don't understand. My responsibility is to the taxpayers, not to ensure that somebody maximizes their development in a particular area. And when we offered the opportunity to go back and look at things, I'm not seeing anything substantially different. I'm seeing the same request, and in some cases, it's 6 stories. I thought there was a maximum of 5 stories. Maybe it's just on one side that it's only a maximum of 5 stories, but I'm hearing 6 stories now. But I don't see any changes in density. I see, the possibility of higher density. I don't know what makes this special. I don't know what the citizens of Seminole County are getting that makes this project us willing to provide them double the density that has been given to any other person before them. And so I feel I've been hoodwinked. We offered them the opportunity to come back and to give us a different proposal with attainable housing. And just because they say that it's not worth the effort, well, folks, it's worth the effort for us. Even if it's a little bit, we've got to find attainable, affordable workforce housing in this community. And this is a perfect location for it because it gives people the opportunity to walk to places and drive short distances for work and to play and everything. So My job is to ensure the protection of the citizens, not the protection of a developer, and not to maximize their ability to get as much density as they can on a particular piece of property. So with all that, I'm going to vote no on this project. And
Commissioner, sorry.
I would just ask everyone else to consider not only why this project is so special that it deserves this much density, but looking at the long-term unintended consequences of what it then boxes us into.
Commissioner Zembauer.
So I appreciate the consideration on the trail, possible parking. I would like at some juncture, because this has been contemplated previously, that some kind of trail access in this general area would benefit, those visiting our area as well as those that work and ultimately live in that area as well. I hear what Commissioner Constantine's saying. The reality is, the Live Local Act, it's all going to be driven by dollars. If the piece of property is so expensive that you can't afford to put affordable housing on it, then that's incumbent upon us on what we're going to do as far as a county to either subsidize or reward through several vehicles that we've already agreed to deploy as far as impact fees and density bonuses and those kinds of things. But the reality is, this is not the right place, in my opinion, for workforce housing. It would be great to have some of that generated. The property values are just sky high. The Wekiva Parkway has come through here, which has changed the entire dynamics of this area. So it's not uncommon that we're seeing, and I think staff has seen, staff is recommending this, staff has seen numerous of these commercial entities coming in that nothing happens with them. So do we want to have things with commercial office just sitting there empty? We have plenty of that in Altamont Springs. We have plenty of that in and around Lake Mary. We've got plenty of that in the county, all over this country right now. So I'm interested to see what the district commissioner's take is on this, but I think, it's a changing dynamics in this whole general area that we need to be paying attention to.
Commissioner Delary.
Thank you. I first have a question for staff. They said 6 stories. Has staff reviewed that, and do we have the capacity from a fire standpoint?
I'll let Scott answer.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, could you restate the question, sir?
In their presentation, they talked about potential of a 6-story building. Do we have any issues when it comes to fire, even though it's close to a fire station, with going 6 stories?
We did not receive any comments from fire stating any concerns over
But did we talk about 6 stories to the fire department?
I did not specifically state the question that way to them.
Okay.
The development order does state there's a cap. To the east, to the point about the height restrictions, there is a 5-story height restriction to the west, 200 feet from the western property boundary, 200 feet east. There's a height restriction of 5 feet. That's basically the Lot 1 that was developed. But any residential development to the east would actually be capped at 6 stories. But to answer your question, no, I did not state that question to fire. We can certainly follow up on that, but it wasn't something that fire safety raised as an issue.
I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
So just to clarify, fire is part of the DRC review process, so they did review the master development plan, so they are aware of the proposed height.
I'm only asking the question.
Yep.
I'm not telling you what.
And I think the applicant had some additional information because they have had some discussion
Okay.
with fire.
Yeah, we actually all met, and the original concept plan was an 8-story product up to 110 feet, which is what is currently allowable. So we have already addressed that and discussed that with fire. And Commissioner Constantine, I hear exactly what you're saying. And one of the dynamics of Central Florida is rents really have been escalating pretty substantially all across the country, but particularly here. And when we look at historical data, and there's a lot of statistics around this, that additional units is actually the best consideration to alleviate the supply constraint that is the market driving force that drives up rent. So I do think that ultimately additional units are going to support whether that's 250 or up to our existing use. And just to clarify, the economic outcome of a 4-story product is stronger than the 6-story or the other product. So in all actuality, that's probably where this is going to go. It's my duty to my partners and to this community for us to exercise all thresholds of what this project is going to be. You know, I'm really glad you brought up taxpayers as well, because this existing tax base is about half, if not a third, of what the tax base would be on a multifamily project, anywhere from a 250 up to the 390. So when I think about being a taxpayer in this community, I'd rather see a higher property tax coming out of this parcel than the lower, which is the configuration. And just to highlight, we actually do have demand to sell out those 3 parcels. We'd actually just sell the parcels out. There's a lot of demand, actually, because all the new highway and flow patterns. Just to touch on the Live Local, so it's actually qualified on what the PD is. And so the PD of our unit request is actually 55 units. So across the street, under the HIP TI, you have 50 units to the acre. So the total configuration of what this PD is going to go to is roughly 55 units to the acre. So it's just a marginal, it's not 85, just to clarify. But I'd suggest council to.
Madam Chair, I respect all people's rights to speak. The applicant, I appreciate what you said, but, you know, we had closed public hearing, and...
He's not the public, he's the applicant.
And he is answering questions, I mean, he's debating me, basically. All I'm saying is, sir, all due respect, even our own folks, which I disagree with because I think your project is 85 units, they're saying it's 65. So to say it's 55 is incorrect. It's 65 at the worst case scenario, at the best case scenario. And I'm not trying to get in a you know, he said, she said, but I Live Local, anybody can use a PD to get it to 85 or 65 units an acre. So with all due respect, you and I agree to disagree.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Weidman, if any other commissioners have any questions, I believe you were brought up here because you were helping to answer a question that was asked prior, and if we have any other questions, we'll bring you up. Commissioner Delary was still asking questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do appreciate people getting into the details that they are, because I think it's important that we look at everything comprehensively. So I guess the question goes to either Doug or Rebecca. So on the actual site plan, even though it's not part of this project, Lot 1 was 290, and Lot 2 and 3 is 390, correct? I'm looking at the notes that you're giving us.
Yeah, so Rebecca is actually going to pull up a table that shows the density for Lot 1. It's a PD, and so we calculate the density across the whole plan development. So it's 12.2 acres. We're calculating the potential 680 units across the 12.2 acres. It's 55 dwelling units per acre. But if you were, I think getting to Commissioner Constantine's point, when you break down and look at the individual lots and you factor out only the acreage of that lot, then the density obviously does increase. But the development order caps the overall density at 56 dwelling units per acre. That takes in the entire site area of the 12.2 acres. I don't know if that answers your question, sir.
It does. I mean, basically, goes to the DO, basically goes to 56. You're averaging it across all the different lots that are on the property, even though the existing the first lot was 45. Now they're adding additional, with lots 2 and 3, they're going up to 55 or 65, which is going to be the average of 55. That's what you're showing us, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they're not taking out the
Commissioner
property.
Constantine, Commissioner Delary has the floor.
I understand. They're not taking out the property that is going to be used for commercial as part of the
Commissioner
thing.
Constantine, Commissioner Delarey has the floor.
Commissioner, I just wanted you to know that.
I understand that. Originally, the square footage of the retail was considerably higher than the 5,000 that they're actually, the DO is saying. Is that correct, Doug?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, sir?
So originally, when they came in here, I don't remember how many weeks back, but several weeks back, the square footage of retail was significantly higher than the 5,000 square feet, correct?
That is correct. I mean, the entitlement goes up to 55,000 square feet for the restaurant and retail combined. On the last time that we were before you, on the 22nd of August, we had presented a higher minimum of 20,000 square feet. Today, you see that number is 5,000. So they have requested a reduction, and the applicant did speak to that he hopes there's more market than 5,000. If I may take a liberty here with the question of, we do have a condition that states that if there's ground floor retail, that cannot be calculated in the density for the residential. So if there's stacking of the buildings and there's residential above the retail, they can count that. That does not count against their density. But if they decide to do ground floor retail without any residential above, that area has to be taken out of their density calculation. So potentially that could, and that would change the numbers that we did present before you.
Well, the only statement that I want to make, and then we can move on, is that when International Drive was originally planned, it was definitely planned for the future. It was 20-plus years ago. None of us was here at that time when International Parkway was actually planned. I don't know the exact time frame when it was planned, but it was more than 20 years ago. And they were planning for the future. It's what needs to happen. You always need to plan for the future. You know, if you always have to look at, well, what is today's market going to establish, then International Parkway would have never been built, you know, because it was built for the future. Maybe not, the market may have not driven it, and it was over time that the market caught up to it. And I think that some of the numbers that we're looking at here by reducing the office retail or the restaurant retail and increasing the density, we're only going for today, we're not looking for the future. And those are my concerns. I just think that it's a little bit too dense.
Commissioner Hurd?
So I appreciate all of the input, but I do want to clarify a couple of things. So it's been stated that there's been no removal of anything in exchange for this. And I'm reading in the document, the proposed 380 new multifamily units would be in place of a 200-key hotel. Is that accurate? So I'm seeing a yes from staff. And 80,000 square feet of Class A office space. So they're not retaining all of the original provisions of the PD. They are, however, retaining flexibility that if we can get more retail and office in there in today's market standards, that flexibility be granted. And it is a total of 55, let's call it 56 to be fair. That is the density for the overall piece of property. It's not 85 for the record. And I appreciate the desire to keep HIP TI in that corridor, and I think that is critical. That ship sailed prior to me getting here with this parcel. It is PD. And I actually think that this development will support HIP TI on the undeveloped parcels that surround this area. And quite frankly, my kids want a Wawa on that corner. So that is ripe for drive-throughs. It's ripe for people coming off of the highway and zipping through and dropping 32 cents of tax dollars on their fast food and getting back on the highway. And that's not what we want there. I'm also not excited about a sort of Class 2 hotel that would be on that property either. I don't think that necessarily adds to this community. So I actually am in support of it, and I realize that I'm going to get absolutely skinned alive, and I know who I'm going to get skinned alive by, because he's already come to my office and talked to me. But the reality of this is that in order to facilitate what we want to happen in that corridor, and in order to condense the multifamily into one location, this is the best use of this property. I think this will make a better, I appreciate the term gateway to the community, because I think that's the goal. But I have to tell you, when you come back with plans that daggum, I had to clean that up, but daggum better meet that standard, because that's what's been committed. I think we have to be respectful to the neighbors. I don't get that intrigued by this trail thing. You guys all know that, so I'll need some guidance from you all about where to put a parking lot next to the trail. But I do think this is the best use. What do the citizens get out of this? They get more supply, which will lower the cost of housing in this community. For us to force affordable housing doesn't solve the problem. It solves the problem of creating additional lists for people to get into affordable housing. It creates the problem 20 years from now when those entitlements come off of the properties. What this does is changes the marketplace in the community, and it also generates a tax base that pays for the impact to infrastructure when some of the other uses for this property simply will not. They'll be a drain to the current citizens in the community. And I'm also going to, on the record, say that the insinuation is insulting that any of us up here are looking out for the developers as opposed to the citizens of this community. With that, I'll move for approval as presented.
Second.
So a motion by Commissioner Herr, there's a second by Commissioner Zembauer. I did have some questions, but I'll just add that to the note of offensiveness, I don't think any of us are hoodwinked. I will ask staff under discussion, either Mr. Robinson or Ms. Hammock, because I think it is important that we address the workforce housing issue, because I think it's been stated a couple of different times. What my understanding is that the workforce, this development is already at the workforce housing price point. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. So with the research that staff did, when we compared the price points at 140% AMI that we received from community services with market rate apartments in this same area, they were already, the price point for 140% AMI is the same as market rate. And I believe the applicant's research
Confirmed
that, yes.
Okay, so we're not giving up workforce housing price point units by not making them go through the workforce housing process. They're already at that price point.
Correct.
Okay. Why is staff recommending approval of this project?
Well, in this case, because the future land use was already amended to PD, it no longer falls under the requirements of the HIP-TI future land use designation. And so based on compatibility and consistency, we believe that the proposed uses are compatible and consistent with the existing developments in the area. If it had retained the HIP-TI future land use designation, then we would have been able to enforce more non-residential uses, but it's not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And also, it is in our urban core area. It's within even our mobility core area. And if you recall, that is one of the areas that we're looking at even proposing higher densities through the year-based amendments in certain cases. And so because of the existing infrastructure and the location to transit and to the highway system, we think it's a proper location for multifamily residential.
Okay. And because the Live Local Act will be something that we will be talking about for some time to come, at least until this next legislative session when it may or may not be tinkered with, is it staff's intention to play defense with zonings going forward in response to that act? Because I'm trying to figure out if every decision we make is in response to something that may happen because of Live Local, is that something that staff is considering moving forward, looking at future rezonings?
No, it's not. And with the Live Local, my understanding, I actually went to a couple of sessions regarding it at the conference I was at earlier in the month, and currently, the PD question isn't resolved. They're saying some attorneys are saying, yes, you would have to allow the maximum density that you allow with any planned development within your community. Some jurisdictions, their attorneys are saying, no, that's not the case. And of course, the legislation doesn't specify, so that may be resolved in the next legislative session. It may be resolved through case law. We'll have to see. But I think in this case, if we were to say, okay, any commercial, industrial, PD, whatever, and that would allow Live Local, in this case, the PD specifically says the highest density allows 56 dwelling units per acre. So if we had another project, if we had a Live Local project come in, then we would say your maximum in the county is 56 dwelling units per acre.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answering the questions. I did take note this morning, Commissioners, when we had our presentation from Mr. McIntyre, when he was talking about looking at the safety of certain banks. One of his comments was they looked at the real estate exposure, commercial and office real estate exposure in terms of banks' viability. It was noted definitely as an increased risk. So that was a little takeaway I had from this morning's briefing. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes 3-2. Our next item on the agenda is County Attorney's report. Is that right? Yes.
Thank you. I have a quick report for you. I wanted to let you know the County Attorney's Office has retained the Schutz Law Firm to assist the county in exploring its options with regard to the PFAS class action lawsuit. And currently, staff is coordinating with Schutz on tests that have already been performed on the county's water supply and exploring whether we have claims and whether we will opt into that lawsuit. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to discuss that with you in further detail.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any questions for the county attorney? No? County manager's report.
Just a couple items. The first one, our Purchasing and Contracts Division was just awarded, make sure I get this correct, the Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award, and it's their 22nd year of receiving this award. So anyway, just wanted to, Ms. Reed and her team to congratulate them, and I'll bring them back at a future meeting. And we were also just notified regarding the public hearing for the Yarborough property. As you know, that was postponed due to the hurricane that went through a couple weeks ago, or a potentially hurricane went through a couple weeks ago. So that is on October the 5th. We don't have a time or location yet, but I just wanted to put it on your radars. We'll be communicating with your offices as soon as they get a hold of us. And this was the public hearing, to hear from the public regarding the Florida Forever applications. I think there's a couple that's going to be heard that night before it goes up to Tallahassee. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. District Commissioner reports, starting with District 5.
Well, thank you. So on September 15th, the county participated in National Online Learning Day, and I don't know if you all saw this, but they shared, HR shared the results of that, and I thought it was rather remarkable, so I wanted to congratulate the HR team and anyone on our team that actually participated. There was a few watch and learns, and some of them were rather absorbable nuggets. So I always appreciate when information is delivered in a very concise fashion so that you can actually absorb it as opposed to trying to sit for 2 hours. That is just not how people learn anymore. So I appreciated us being on the front end of that. I did share with your offices via Brenda the outcome of a CFX briefing on the 417 and 429. We are moving closer to flex lanes. This is the first in the state And basically what this is creating a shoulder that can be used, initially it's going to be used for accidents only, but it eventually will be used to accommodate traffic flow and peak times. So there are other parts of the country that have done this for years and years. The bridges up in the Northeast do it, where they turn the lights off and on, everybody getting out of the city and everybody coming into the city. But this is using the shoulder to do that. It will be dynamically controlled through signage, and I thought it was worth sharing. On September 9th, I took part in the throwing of dirt for Fire Station 39, so congratulations to our team for progressing that along. And unfortunately, on September 22nd, I had the opportunity to visit Animal Control, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the team there for the work that they're doing with regard to the most recent situation, which is certainly now the second in my short time here that we've had a pretty horrible situation with treatment of animals in our community. I will let you know that I have asked the team to not only research what it is that we can do to certainly serve those new residents of animal services. That's already being done. But what is it that we can do as a board to help us avoid this in the future? How do we get in front of this even more than we are now? And so that team is diligently working on that. I delivered a bunch of stuff for the new residents, as well as, I shouldn't say this out loud, given my focus on wellness. There were some apples and oranges in there for, just to defend myself, but there was a lot of junk food in there because I'm a stress eater, and this was a stressful situation, and that was my way of showing empathy. And what was amazing to watch, and I was super uncomfortable being there because I was just simply in their way, but it was a well-oiled machine putting together all of the parts and pieces for all of the work that's about to be done with regard to that. So I appreciate all of the folks on that team, and I hope we never have to do that again. And that concludes my report.
All right, moving to District 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was an issue over by Old Lockwood Road between Oviedo and UCF regarding a stress crack in the reclaimed water line. The county staff's been working very diligent on that, and it was completed this past Friday. So, Mr. Gray, if you could inform your staff that they did a phenomenal job, not just in replacing the line, it was also managing traffic and expectations. So I've heard a lot of good things from the community regarding that. I have also some meetings with Sunrail regarding the transition proposal, and I'd like to ask all of you to meet with our staff, Mr. Paul Chipak, as well as Mr. John Dredge, so they can brief you on the proposed transition plan. I've not seen the whole plan yet. I've not fully been briefed, but I know it's coming, and there'll have to be some decisions to be made in upcoming months. And so in order to get out in front of it, I think it would behoove us if we're all briefed, and I think that would be advantageous to do that. Also, last week on September 19th, Public Works had a community meeting, or a public input meeting on Slavia Road extension from 426 to 434. I thought there were some issues with that, and please be briefed from the staff perspective on that. I think that I was there as well as Commissioner Zimbauer, hearing from the public. There had to be at least anywhere from 140 to 160 people there. Very few people came out away from that meeting satisfied or believe that they were informed. I think there were more confusion than they were satisfied with the information that was obtained. In fact, one phone call I had during lunch with one resident was telling me that the video they showed us, they believed it was just, wasn't fully complete, and it was a canned video, and they're hoping that we have another meeting soon. They want to have some open conversation with staff, even though they had the boards, and staff was standing by the boards. The community felt very frustrated from that perspective. They'd like to actually have dialogue. I want to thank Commissioner Zimbauer for being there. I know he was involved talking to many residents as well. I've been on the phone constantly since that meeting, and there was a lot of people upset over it, and they're trying to understand, as well as myself, where's the traffic coming from, where's it going to, and I think it was too premature to have that meeting, but I'll be getting briefed as well from the consultants. Having gotten all the information from that written cards that people have been writing in that public input, hopefully I can get that next week, as well as I'll make sure that this is assimilated to all of you as well. Having over 100 people there, you can imagine all the input cards that people have to fill out or filled out, and now it has to be deciphered and categorized. So I'm looking for more information. I just think that the meeting was too premature, and that stay tuned. End of my report.
District 2.
My district's always perfect. Everybody's so happy. Well, I did attend the Slavia Road community meeting, and there was a lot of people there. It was well attended. There was a lot of questions, and I think between Commissioner Delory, myself, and staff, we tried to get some of those answers. I think there's some more answers we put out there. If I had one recommendation on that, would be that, and I don't want our staff to take this wrong, it's from an engineering perspective, I think what was conveyed is appropriate, but I think putting in the context of layman's terms on what this really means is better serving the community and understanding this is just a possibility. This is not necessarily happening. And then how long it happens to take before we ever turn the first piece of dirt. A lot of folks felt this was going to happen like next year. We were going to start turning dirt.
No, there's some people who believed it was happening this year.
Well, I know, I understand. So I do appreciate staff time out there. Also want to thank staff for coming out and helping us with the Whitcomb Road issue, as John and his group were out there and trying to facilitate, this Whitcomb Road being raised for the flooding issues and so forth, whether we ever get there or not. I think we've done the best job we can trying to convince the local residents for them to help us help them, which means we need right-of-way. We need easements across their property, and I think last count we've got somewhere around a dozen that have not committed to do that yet, which is heartbreaking for the ones that have committed to do it, but as we've told them in the meeting that we will not proceed if we can't get the right-of-way, and there's some other challenges there. So I want to thank staff for that. Well attended. I appreciate staff coming to the to the far reaches of this county, almost to Brevard County, quite frankly, and coming out there. Also, Lake Tuscaloosa and Little Lake Howell had a great lake activity this past weekend. I know Commissioner Delory, I believe you attended. I was not able to make it because of prior commitments. We had 89 volunteers, planted 2,336 native plants in the lake. That's Lake Tuscaloosa and Little Lake Howell. And I appreciate all those people coming out, and I appreciate Commissioner Delory being able to make it in my absence. Also want to bring everybody up to speed on Orlando Sanford International Airport. There was a meeting that was called, an emergency meeting, approximately a week and a half ago. The board meeting, unanimously, the board decided to terminate the contractual agreement with OSI. That will be effective February 28th of '24. And basically what that means is the airport will be taking over all those duties as they transition towards February 28th. The board has given instruction to look at some additional consultants perhaps, and so that's all an evolving situation, but OSI has been notified they intend to terminate on the 28th of November. Outside of that, that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
District 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On September 15th, someone that all of us admire and respect Katie Moncrief, who, I don't want to make this wrong, but I think she's 97 now, received numerous awards for lifetime achievements, both from Seminole County as well as statewide. Also, on the 22nd, I attended the Bright Line grand opening, which I think it's an amazing thought now that we have the highest or the second highest speed rail in the United States. And that was the first actual group that came from Miami to Orlando. The interesting thing is those that were going from Orlando to Miami on the other train were very excited to see that there was free food and open bar as they walked into the place because it was the first one. So they were very happy. On the 20th, tomorrow, the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is one group as part of the whole thing that's going to help us potentially in getting some of the land with Florida Forever and Seminole Forever, is having a conference. I believe it started today, and it'll go through Thursday. But there are a number of speakers and everything, and it's out at the Crib Royale. And as I said, is something that has really been embraced by the legislature as far as a complement to the Florida Forever program is connecting the wildlife corridors. Also, tomorrow, Attorney General Ashley Moody has set up the first meeting of the statewide opioid abatement council. She called for it starting at 2 o'clock. It will be by Zoom. So I'm very excited to get moving in on the statewide opioid abatement council. September 30th, our very good friend who has been here numerous times, Father John Blewett, and his Pathways to Care is having a soup bowl supper at St. Mary Magdalene, if anybody wishes to go. And also...
he just turned 85.
I did hear that.
He just turned 85.
I did hear that. Looking great. And also...
I wouldn't go that far, but...
Also, on October 7th is the first of the 2 Saturdays that our very favorite German American Society is having their Oktoberfest in... I think it's in Castleberry, but it's right between Altamont, Longwood, and Castleberry. You really don't know Fern Park. You really don't know where exactly it is, but you know that you come up on it and it looks like it's a chalet. But it will be. It's always well attended and a lot of fun. And it has come to my attention both from staff as well as some citizens, and this is just something I would ask the commission to indulge in, that there is, many of you recall or know about Spring Valley. It's one of our more mature communities. They had a bridle path, not the marriage bridle path, but the horse bridle path that even my cousin used to ride her horses back then. But there's a number of people that have already built into that easement, and a number of people that are actually asking to use that easement. The staff indicates that it would be much simpler if we did it all at one time. And so I'm not asking for approval. I'm asking for us to give the staff direction to allow them to look into the possibility of vacating that bridle path and coming back to us with their recommendation, if that's okay with y'all.
It's the first I've heard of it, but...
I'm aware of the old equestrian.
I'm just asking for them to look into it and come back.
I don't have a problem.
Have you talked about this?
I don't have a problem with staff looking into it. I don't know, it may have some value from a drainage perspective. I don't know. Engineering should weigh in as well. I don't know.
We could do a full staff review of it and bring it back.
That's all I'm asking.
That's fine.
And with that, I have nothing else. Thank you.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Richard Sweat and his team at Dot Decimal. Richard is the new chairman for, call it Workforce Central Florida.
Source.
It's not Workforce Central
Career
Florida
Source.
anymore, it's Career Source. Had some great dialogue, spent time with Nick Abrahams, was also there from OEP, and of course, you all know Robert Utze was there. Belinda Kirkgard was also present, talking about the work that if you all have never been to Dot Decimal, it's an incredible homegrown business where they create molds that help physicians target radiation therapy for cancer patients. And they are doing such incredible work that a doctor can literally send the specifics of a tumor and the place in the body, and Richard and his team can build, with a 24-hour turnaround, the model of the device that needs to be built to wrap this person's arm, torso, head, to direct the radiation to that tumor and have it in that doctor's hands so that patient can start treatment within 24 hours, coming right here out of Little Seminole County. And they're making such an incredible impact all over the world. And of course, with his volunteer capacity, I was going to say we're Career Source. Good night. I've got a block. There is a...
That doesn't get any better, by the way.
Oh, heavens. There is a real need for the development of a workforce. I think that's why I kept going to workforce. And the opportunities that we have in Seminole County with our partnerships with the college and partnership with UCF and Seminole State, other regional partners. And I think we're really heading toward an opportunity to have a good convening, if you will, with his leadership. So I'll put that on your radar to be looking for something like that coming down the pike. Also have an opportunity to get reacquainted with Rosenwald. I think our team has done some additional work. There have been some pivots, if you will, on some of the work out there. And so I would ask if your team, Mr. Gray, could work with scheduling a time that would be appropriate to bring everybody up to speed and all of the different partners. Had a great conversation with another a philanthropist in the community. Any of you who follow professional basketball may know Anthony Simons. He was raised in this community. His mother is from East Altamont, and they have a deep desire to be a benefactor of the Rosenwald project in some way, shape, or form. So we're starting to get some really good traction with folks in the private sector from a philanthropic viewpoint who see the good things that are scheduled to happen at Rosenwald. I want to say 2 happy birthdays. Kate Latour had a birthday, and Commissioner Herr had a birthday. September birthdays. What does that make you? What are you?
I'm a Virgo.
Virgos?
I'm a Libra.
Oh.
Always balancing the messes.
Yeah, there you go. I know very little about that stuff, but I hear it's important, so I thought I should ask for anybody who cared. The first meeting of our Charter Review Commission will be on October 5th at 6. I will be here to welcome everyone and say thank you so much for their willingness to participate in that process. On the 3rd, I will be hosting Commissioner Mike Scott from Orange County on a tour of our Juvenile Assessment Center. He and his team, I don't know if you're familiar with Commissioner Scott, but he has a background and passion for juvenile services. And when we started talking at a recent FAC conference about our new JAC, he was like, oh, well, we need to see that. So our team, along with the sheriff, is going to be hosting some folks from their team. So we're going to hopefully put on a good, roll out the red carpet for our friends from Orange County. And then one more thing I want to say, which is kind of sad, but I have to bring it up, is that today is Mary Moskowitz's last Board of County Commissioners meeting. Many of you know that Mary has been given a job opportunity that she just cannot refuse, and it requires that she leave us and leave the state. Is that right? So we're going to miss you tremendously. We wish you and your family safe travels, Godspeed, fun, exciting times I know ahead for you, but you're going to be missed. Yeah, so then that is all I have for these items. We have a budget public hearing tonight, just to remind everybody before we talk about public comment. Do we have anyone here that's requested public comment? I didn't see very many unfamiliar faces in the crowd, so I assumed that there was no member of the public here who wished to speak, unless someone has had a burning desire in the last 30 seconds.
Madam Chair, if you can indulge me on...
Yes.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on Commissioner Delari's mention of the Sunrail transition proposal.
Yes, and I knew that was coming, and I had to step out, so I'm sorry I missed that briefing. Please do.
Okay. As part of that, as you know, the transition is that DOT will transition out of the operating procedures and turn it over to the CFCRC. And the proposal on the table, it would be Lynx or an agency like Lynx would then become the operator on behalf of the CFCRC. A new proposal has come up where there's lots of moving parts and lots of layers to the onion. So rather than just do a straight transition agreement like that, to have an interim period agreement where once the transition occurs for the financial responsibility and the decision-making responsibility going all to the CFCRC, DOT would continue as the operating entity as it slowly, over a period of 2 to 3 years, transition the operating requirements to Lynx or the agency like Lynx. That's a new concept, something that hasn't been presented to us before. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it and that we as staff can continue to explore that item in depth with DOT, with Lynx, and with the other local government partners to try and bring that to fruition.
And if I may ask a question, because I'm so sorry, Commissioner Delary, I missed that. Is there a reason why this third option has been presented? Is there something that wasn't acceptable with option 1 and 2 that we felt that an option 3 was necessary to bring forward?
I think the option is still the same. The transition will go from DOT to the CFCRC, who will then hire an operating agent as an agency. And again, Lynx is the obvious choice right now, but again, it's not final until we all approve it and have an operating agreement with them. But as far as the details of moving all of the hundreds of contracts from DOT to Lynx, part of that should be done on a more transitional basis, on an interim basis, as opposed to tossing the keys on whatever date it is and saying, here you go, boys.
Okay, all right.
Another way to describe it is that it's a very complex project,
Yes, it is.
very complex agreement,
Correct.
and it was talked about trying to stage it so that it would be easier maintained and managed. But none of the items are changing. It's just staging it.
Correct. Correct. We're not conceding anything by doing this. All of the issues that are outstanding issues still have to be resolved.
And that's the part that needs to be stressed.
Yes.
And Madam Chairman, if I could add, so you may have been out when when Commissioner Delari's given this piece. He had asked staff that if we would brief each of you on this proposal. We're actually have a meeting coming up, set up, so we can get more information on it, and then we're going to be briefing each of your offices and then bring it back to the board.
Okay.
Okay,
That's great.
thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Mr. Schipbach or anything on this item? No? Okay. If there is nothing else to come before the board, we'll be in recess until 5:30, when we'll reconvene for our final budget public hearing.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all so much.